He didn't just scream. He howled. It was 3 a.m. in the most secure private wing of St. Walter Mary's Hospital, a place that doesn't officially exist on the floor plan. The patient was Alessandro Romano, the heir to the most dangerous crime family in Chicago. He was supposed to be recovering from a gunshot wound, safe behind bulletproof glass and armed guards. But when nurse Kaylee Johnson rushed in and cut open his pillow to find the source of his agony, she didn't find a feather. She found 17 sewing needles, positioned specifically to pierce the base of his skull. The assassin wasn't outside the room. The assassin had been in the bed with him, and the nightmare was just beginning. The 4th floor of the Kensington Private Institute in upstate New York was referred to by the staff simply as the Ghost Wing. You didn't get assigned there. You were invited. And you didn't accept the invitation unless you were desperate for money or addicted to danger. Kaylee Johnson was the former. At 26, Kaylee was a trauma nurse with steady hands and a mountain of medical school debt that was drowning her. When the agency called her regarding a high-priority private duty contract offering triple her current salary, she didn't ask about the patient's medical history. She didn't ask why the contract included a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to be a novel. She just signed. The facility was sterile, cold, and quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled of antiseptic and expensive lilies. Room 404, the head matron, Mrs. Gable, had said, her voice devoid of warmth. Mr. Romano is particular. He is recovering from thoracic surgery. Standard post-op care. But Kaylee, do not speak to the family. Do not make eye contact with the men in the hallway. You do your job, and you leave. The men in the hallway were impossible to miss, 2 of them. They wore suits that cost more than Kaylee's car, tailored to hide the bulge of holsters at their ribs. They didn't look at her as she swiped her keycard. They scanned her. It felt like being stripped naked by a pair of wolves. Inside. Room 404 looked less like a hospital room and more like a penthouse suite, albeit one filled with EKG monitors and IV stands. The patient, Alessandro Sandro Romano, was asleep, even pale and hooked up to a morphine drip. He was striking. Dark hair swept back from a sharp, aristocratic forehead, a jawline that looked carved from granite. But it was the bruising on his chest and the heavy bandaging around his ribs that told the real story. The chart said, hunting accident. Kaylee knew a close-range gunshot wound when she saw one. For 3 days, the routine was monotonous. Check vitals, adjust the drip, change the dressings. Sandro was mostly silent, lost in a drug-induced haze. Occasionally, his eyes would flutter open dark, intense eyes that seemed to track her movement with suspicion before sliding back into unconsciousness. The tension, however, came from the visitors. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the air in the room grew heavy. The door opened, and a man walked in who sucked the oxygen right out of the space. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been weathered by decades of brutal decisions. This was Stefano Romano, the Don. He didn't acknowledge Carly. He walked straight to the bedside, looking down at his son with a mixture of disgust and worry. "You were careless, Sandro," Stefano murmured, his voice a low gravel. "Careless men do not lead." Sandro stirred, grimacing as he tried to shift. "I was set up," he rasped, his voice dry. "By who?" Stefano snapped. "We have checked everyone, the lieutenants, the drivers, even the kitchen staff at the club. No one talks. Someone talks. Sandro whispered, closing his eyes. Someone is always talking. Kaylee tried to make herself invisible in the corner, adjusting the blinds. She felt like an intruder in a lion's den. She knew who the Romanos were. Everyone did. They ran the unions, the docks, and half the real estate in the city. To be in a room with them was to be standing on a landmine. "Fix this," Stefano said. Turning to leave, he paused at the door, finally looking at Kaylee. His eyes were cold, dead things. "Nurse, if he is in pain, you fix it. If he dies, well, let's ensure he doesn't." He left, leaving a lingering scent of cigar smoke and fear. Kaylee let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She approached the bed to check Sandro's blood pressure. "Don't let him scare you," Sandro said. His eyes were open, clear for the first time. "He's just an old dog barking at shadows." "He seems very concerned for you," Kaylee said professionally, wrapping the cuff around his arm. Sandro let out a dry, humorless laugh that turned into a cough. "He's concerned about his investment. There's a difference." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for a second, the mask of the Mafia prince slipped. He looked young, tired, and incredibly lonely. "What's your name, Kaylee?" "Kaylee," he repeated, testing the weight of it. "You have kind hands, Kaylee. Don't let this place ruin them." That night, the atmosphere in the ghost wing shifted. A storm was rolling in over the Hudson, battering the windows with rain. The guards outside seemed more agitated than usual, their radios crackling with low static. Kaylee was at the nurse's station, charting Sandro's intake, when the screaming started. It wasn't a cry of surprise. It was a guttural, raw shriek of pure agony. Kaylee dropped her tablet and sprinted. She swiped her card, the red light turning green, and burst into room 404. Sandro was thrashing on the bed, his hands clawing at his own head, his body arching off the mattress. The heart monitor was screaming a high-pitched alarm tachycardia, 160 beats per minute, and climbing. "Mr. Romano," Kaylee shouted, rushing to his side. "Sandro, what is it?" He couldn't speak. He was gasping, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. He was grabbing the back of his neck, his fingers digging into the skin. "My head!" he choked out. The pillow fire." "It feels like fire." Kaylee grabbed his shoulders, trying to stabilize him. She thought maybe he was having an aneurysm or a reaction to the medication, but he kept trying to throw himself off the pillows. "Help me up," he roared, with a strength she didn't know she had. Kaylee hooked her arms under his armpits and hauled him forward, sitting him up. He slumped against her shoulder, panting, sweat drenching his hospital gown. "The pillow," he gasped again. "Check the pillow." Kaylee looked at the expensive, hypoallergenic pillow provided by the clinic. It looked normal. Crisp white linen, fluffed perfectly. She reached out to touch it. "Careful," Sandro warned, his voice trembling. Kaylee pressed her hand gently onto the center of the pillow, where his head had been resting. She felt a sharp prick. She pulled her hand back, a tiny bead of blood forming on her index finger. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She grabbed a pair of trauma shears from her pocket. "Don't move," she told Sandro. She sliced into the pillowcase, then the pillow ticking. She ripped the fabric open, the stuffing spilling out like snow. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, embedded deep within the stuffing, arranged in a terrifyingly precise, upward-facing circle, were needles. Long, thick, darning needles. There were dozens of them, but they weren't just thrown in. They had been threaded through a mesh base so they would stand straight up. When Sandro had laid his head down, nothing would have happened. But as the pillow compressed over hours, as the weight of his head sank deeper into the soft down, the needles would have slowly, incrementally risen. They were positioned to pierce the occipital nerves at the base of the skull. Needles, Kaylee whispered, horror cold in her veins. Someone put needles in your pillow. Sandro looked at the mess of feathers and steel. His face went hard. The pain was still there, but the fear was gone, replaced by a dark, simmering rage. Not someone, he said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Family. The silence that followed the discovery was louder than the scream. Kaylee stood frozen, the shears still in her hand. The needles glinted under the fluorescent nightlight, tiny, silver soldiers of death. Call the guards, Sandro ordered. He was sitting on the edge of the bed now, swaying slightly, blood matting the hair at the base of his neck where the points had broken the skin. I need to treat your wounds first, Kaylee argued, her nurse instincts overriding her terror. You're bleeding. Infection risk is— I said call the guards, Sandro barked. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. Kaylee, listen to me. Whoever did this, they didn't just walk in off the street. They had access. They had time. If you don't call the guards now, we are both dead before sunrise. She looked into his eyes and saw the truth of it. This wasn't a hospital anymore. It was a crime scene. She hit the panic button on the wall. Within 10 seconds, the door burst open. The two men from the hallway, Marco and a giant named Silas, rushed in, guns drawn. Clear, Marco shouted, sweeping the bathroom. Put the guns away, you idiots, Sandro snapped. He pointed a shaking finger at the ruined pillow. Look! Silas, a man whose neck was wider than Kaylee's waist, leaned in when he saw the needles. His face drained of color. He looked at Sandro, then at Kaylee, and finally at Marco. Boss isn't going to like this, Silas muttered. Lock it down, Sandro commanded. Nobody in, nobody out. Not the doctors, not the janitors, especially not the nurses. He looked at Kaylee then. There was an apology in his eyes, but it was buried under layers of survival instinct. Her too, Sandro said. Search her. What? Kaylee stepped back, clutching the shears. I found them, I saved you. Or you put them there and got cold feet, Marco spat. He holstered his weapon and advanced on her. Turn around, sweetheart, hands on the wall. Sandro, Kaylee pleaded, looking at the patient she had just comforted. Sandro didn't look away, but his jaw tightened. Do it, Marco, but be gentle. If she's clean, I want her treating me. If she's not— He didn't finish the sentence. The humiliation of the search was efficient and professional, which somehow made it worse. Marco patted her down, checked her pockets, even checked the soles of her shoes. She's clean, Marco announced. Just phone, keys, and medical supplies. Check the room, Sandro said. Sweep it for bugs, cameras, anything. While the guards tore the room apart, Kaylee retrieved the antiseptic and gauze. She moved behind Sandro. This is going to sting, she said, her voice trembling with anger. I know, he said. He didn't flinch as she cleaned the puncture wounds on his neck. I'm sorry about the search. Kaylee, in my world, trust gets you killed faster than a bullet. Your world sucks, she muttered, applying a sterile dressing. Tell me about it. Suddenly, the door flew open again. This time, it wasn't the guards. It was a man Kaylee hadn't seen before. He was younger than Stefano, but older than Sandro. He wore a camel hair coat and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Alessandro!" the man cried out, rushing forward. "I heard the alarm. My God! Are you all right?" Sandro stiffened under Kaylee's hands. She felt his muscles coil like a spring. "I'm fine, Uncle Luca," Sandro said, his voice flat. "Just a little prick." Luca stopped at the foot of the bed, his eyes darting to the shredded pillow. For a fraction of a second so fast, Kaylee almost missed it. A look of genuine annoyance crossed his face. Not concern, annoyance, like a man who had dropped his keys. "A pillow?" Luca asked, picking up a handful of feathers. "Someone tried to hurt you with a pillow. Needles, Luca," Sandro said. 17 of them, threaded through the base. "Barbaric," Luca said, shaking his head. He looked at Kaylee. "And who is this? The one who found it?" "Kaylee Johnson," Sandro said. "She's my nurse." Luca smiled at her. It was a shark's smile. "You have done the Romano family a great service tonight. Miss Johnson, we are in your debt." Kaylee felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She looked at Luca's hands. They were manicured, clean, but on the cuff of his expensive camel coat, near the buttons, she saw something. A tiny, white feather. It was innocuous. He could have picked it up just now when he touched the bedding, but he hadn't touched the bedding yet when she saw it. He had walked in with it. "Thank you," Kaylee said, keeping her voice steady. "Luca," Sandro said. "Call father. Tell him to come, and tell him to bring the cleanup crew." "Already done," Luca said smoothly. "But Alessandro, perhaps we should move you. This room is obviously compromised. My car is downstairs. I can take you to the safe house in Jersey." Kaylee saw Sandro's hand tighten on the bedsheet. "No," Sandro said. "I'm not leaving this room until father gets here. Kaylee, check my IV. I feel lightheaded." It was a code. The IV was fine. He wanted her close. She stepped up to the bed, placing her body between Sandro and his uncle. "Mr. Romano needs rest," Kaylee said firmly, channeling her best head nurse authority. "His heart rate is still unstable. I need everyone who isn't security to step outside." Luca's smile faltered. "I am family." "I don't care if you're the Pope," Kaylee said. "Get out." Silas, the giant guard, stepped forward. He seemed to sense the shift in the air. "You heard the nurse. Mr. Luca. Boss will be here in 20. Wait in the hall." Luca glared at Kaylee, a look of pure venom that promised retribution. "Very well," he said, smoothing his coat. "Take care of him. Nurse Johnson, he is very precious to us." He turned and left. As soon as the door clicked shut, Sandro grabbed Kaylee's hand. His skin was clammy. "You have a death wish," he hissed, talking to Luca like that. "He had a feather on his sleeve," Kaylee whispered, leaning down so only Sandro could hear. "Before he touched the bed." Sandro's eyes went wide. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "Luca," he breathed. "My own uncle." "He wanted to take you to a second location," Kaylee said. "Sandro, if you get in that car, I disappear," he finished. The reality of the situation crashed down on Kaylee. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She had just made an enemy of the man who tried to kill the Mafia boss's son, and she was trapped in a locked wing with him pacing the hallway outside. "What do we do?" she asked. Sandro looked at the door, then at the window where the rain was lashing against the glass. "We wait for my father," Sandro said, "and we pray that Luca doesn't decide to finish the job before he gets here." He looked at her, his dark eyes intense. "Kaylee, listen to me closely. From this moment on, you eat nothing they bring you. You drink nothing unless I drink it first. You are under my protection. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. But as she looked at the needles scattered on the floor, she knew that protection in this world was a relative term. The pillow was just the beginning. The real needles were hidden in the smiles of the men outside. The arrival of Stefano Romano was not like the arrival of police or hospital administrators. It was like a shift in gravity. The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged, and suddenly the air in the ghost wing became thin. Stefano walked with a cane, not out of necessity, but as a weapon. The handle was solid silver, shaped like a lion's head. Behind him were 6 men, moving in a phalanx, but Stefano walked alone in the front, his eyes scanning the corridor, the guards, and finally resting on the open door of room 404. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Luca was leaning against the window, feigning casual concern, but his eyes kept darting to the shredded pillow. Sandro sat on the edge of the bed, pale but upright, his hand hovering near Kaylee's arm as if to shield her. "Father," Sandro said. It wasn't a greeting. It was an acknowledgement of rank. Stefano didn't speak. He walked to the bed, picked up the pillow with a gloved hand, and examined the needles. He ran his thumb along the edge of the tear Kaylee had made. "Surgical precision," Stefano murmured. He looked at Kaylee. "You found this?" "Yes," Kaylee said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. His heart rate spiked. I thought it was a seizure. When I checked his head placement, I felt the point. Stefano turned the pillow over. 17 needles. A slow death. An agonizing death. It would have looked like a stroke or a brain bleed. He dropped the pillow on the floor. It landed with a soft thud. He turned to Luca, who had access to the room. Brother Luca pushed off the windowsill, his face a mask of righteous indignation. "The staff, obviously. We pay these doctors a fortune, and they hire incompetence. I told you, Stefano, this facility is compromised. We should have moved him to the Jersey safe house hours ago." "Jersey," Sandro said, his voice quiet. "Where there are no cameras, no records." "Where you are safe," Luca snapped. "Enough," Stefano said. The word was spoken softly, but it silenced the room instantly. He looked at his son. "You do not want to go to Jersey. I want to go home," Sandro said. "To the estate. And I want Silas driving. No one else." Stefano nodded slowly. And the girl, everyone looked at Kaylee. She felt like a specimen under a microscope. "She's a liability," Luca said quickly. "She's seen too much. Pay her off. Silence her. Get a verified doctor from the payroll." "She saved my life," Sandro cut in, his voice hard. "If she hadn't cut that pillow, I'd be dead or vegetable by morning. She's the only one in this room I know for a fact didn't put the needles there." The accusation hung in the air. Sandro hadn't named Luca, but the implication was a sledgehammer. Stefano looked at Kaylee, really studied her. He looked at her cheap nursing shoes, her messy bun, the ID badge clipped to her scrubs. "What is your price, Miss Johnson?" "I don't have a price," Kaylee said, surprised by her own boldness. "I have a patient. He's not stable enough for transport without medical supervision. His blood pressure is 150/90. He's at risk of a secondary hemorrhage." Stefano smiled. It was a terrifying expression. Loyalty to the Hippocratic Oath. Rare. He turned to his head of security. "Pack him up. We leave in 5 minutes. The nurse comes with us. Wait, Kaylee protested. I can't just leave. I have a contract with the agency. I have a cat. Your contract is bought, Stefano said, turning his back on her. Your cat will be fed. Your life outside this room is paused. Miss Johnson, until I find out who put steel in my son's pillow, no one who was in this room leaves my sight. Kaylee looked at Sandro for help, but he was already moving, swinging his legs off the bed. He grimaced in pain, clutching his ribs. Do as he says, Kaylee, Sandro whispered as she moved to support him. Please, it's the only way I can keep you alive. The exit was a military operation. The hallways were cleared. The freight elevator was held. Kaylee found herself flanking Sandro, holding his IV bag like a lifeline, surrounded by a wall of men in dark suits. As they reached the loading dock, the rain was coming down in sheets. A line of black SUVs idled, engines purring. Get in the second car, Luca ordered, pointing Kaylee toward a vehicle near the back. Alessandro rides with his father. Sandro stopped. The rain soaked his hospital gown instantly. He looked at his uncle. No, Sandro said. Kaylee rides with me. Silas drives. Father in the lead car. You take the rear. Uncle, this is ridiculous, Luca spat. She is a nurse, not a bodyguard. She stays with me, Sandro roared, the sound tearing at his injured throat. Stefano, already in the lead car, rolled down his window. Give the boy what he wants. Luca, get in the back. Luca's jaw tightened, a vein pulsing in his temple. He glared at Kaylee, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. He knew she had seen the feather. He knew she was the loose thread that could unravel his entire tapestry. As you wish, Luca said. Kaylee scrambled into the back of the armored SUV with Sandro. Silas slammed the door, locking them in. The interior was dead silent, soundproofed against the storm. As the convoy pulled out, Sandro slumped against the leather seat, his energy spent. He looked at Kaylee, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and intensity. You have no idea what you just walked into, he murmured. I think I do, Kaylee said, shivering. Your uncle wants you dead, and now he wants me dead too. Sandro reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, warm. He won't touch you, not while I'm breathing. That's exactly what I'm worried about, Kaylee replied, looking out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of blood red and gold. How long do you plan on breathing? Sandro. He squeezed her hand. Long enough to bury him. The drive to the Romano estate took an hour, winding away from the city and into the deep, wooded hills of the countryside. The estate was a misnomer. It was a fortress disguised as a mansion. 12-foot iron gates, topped with cameras, opened silently to admit the convoy. The driveway was a mile long, lined with ancient oaks that looked like skeletal sentinels in the headlights. The main house was a sprawling stone structure that looked like it had been transported from the Italian coast. It was beautiful, illuminated by floodlights. But to Kaylee, it looked like a prison. When the cars stopped, the routine began again. Doors opening, guards fanning out, earpieces buzzing. Welcome to hell, Sandro muttered as Silas helped him out of the car. They were ushered into a grand foyer with marble floors and a chandelier the size of a small car. Servants, or perhaps just more well-dressed staff, stood in a line, heads bowed. Take him to the east wing, Stefano commanded. Set up the medical suite. Kaylee was swept along in the current. The medical suite turned out to be a fully functioning hospital room set up inside a master bedroom. It had oxygen, monitors, a defibrillator, everything. Get him settled, Stefano told Curly. Dinner is at 8 o'clock. You will eat in your room. She eats with me, Sandro said, lying back on the fresh linens. Stefano paused at the door. She is staff, Alessandro. She is the taster, Sandro countered. Unless you want me to trust the cook, the same cook Luca hired. Stefano's face darkened. The reality of the betrayal was sinking in deeper. Fine. Trays will be brought up. Silas stands guard outside the door. No one else enters. Once they were alone. The silence of the room was heavy. Kaylee went into automatic mode, hooking up the monitors, checking his vitals. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. You can relax, Sandro said, watching her. The room is swept daily. No bugs here. Relax, Kaylee laughed, a frantic, high-pitched sound. I was kidnapped. Sandro, I'm in a Mafia fortress. The man downstairs wants to kill us, and I'm wearing scrubs covered in your blood. Sandro sat up, wincing. In the closet, there are clothes. My ex. She left some things. They should fit. Kaylee hesitated, then walked to the massive walk-in closet. Inside, rows of designer dresses, silk blouses, and cashmere sweaters hung perfectly. It felt wrong, wearing a ghost's clothes, but she was freezing and covered in hospital grime. She grabbed a simple oversized cashmere sweater and a pair of leggings. When she came out, Sandro was staring at the ceiling. Why? She asked, sitting in the chair next to the bed. Why does your uncle want you dead? Sandro turned his head. Because my father is dying. The confession hit Kaylee like a slap. Stefano. He looks strong. He has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, Sandro whispered. Nobody knows. Only me, Luca, and the family doctor. He has 6 months, maybe less. When he dies, the empire passes to me, unless I'm not here. Then it goes to Luca, Kaylee realized. Exactly. Luca has been waiting 30 years for the throne. He doesn't want to serve another king. He wants to be the king. So he tried the hunting accident, Kaylee deduced. And when that failed, the hospital, Sandro nodded. He's getting desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. The feather on his coat was a mistake. But why can't you just tell your father? Kaylee asked. About the feather, or... Because a feather isn't proof, Sandro said. And Luca is his brother. They grew up together. They bled together. If I accuse Luca without absolute, undeniable proof, my father will think I'm paranoid. Or worse, he'll think I'm trying to cut Luca out to consolidate power. It could start a civil war inside the family. So we have to wait for him to try again, Kaylee said, horrified. Yes. Sandro looked at her, his expression softening. I'm sorry, Kaylee. I never wanted to drag an innocent into this. I'm not innocent anymore, she said. I'm an accomplice. A knock came at the door. 3 sharp raps. Silas, Sandro said. Kaylee opened the door. Silas stood there with a silver trolley cart covered in domed platters. He looked apologetic. Dinner, he grunted. Boss checked it himself. Kaylee wheeled the cart in. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the room, making her stomach grow violently. She hadn't eaten in 12 hours. She lifted the silver dome. The food looked delicious, but as she reached for a fork, Sandro stopped her. Wait, he said. He pulled a small vial from the bedside drawer, a chemical testing kit. You're joking, Kaylee said. Paranoia keeps you old, Sandro said. He swabbed the chicken, then dipped the swab into the solution. It remained clear. "Safe," he said. Breathing out, they ate in silence, sitting on the bed like two teenagers at a sleepover, except for the looming threat of death. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Kaylee noticed how Sandro's eyelashes cast shadows on his cheekbones. She noticed the way his hands, dangerous hands, held the fork with elegance. "You have a family?" Sandro asked suddenly. "A mom in Florida," Kaylee said. "We don't talk much. And my cat, Barnaby." "Barnaby," Sandro smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had seen. It transformed his face. He looked devastatingly handsome. "I'll buy Barnaby the biggest scratching post in the world when this is over." "If it's over," she corrected. "When?" he insisted. Suddenly, the lights in the room flickered. Sandro froze. He looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. It blinked off. The hum of the air conditioning died. Total silence. "Power cut," Kaylee whispered. "No," Sandro said, reaching under his pillow and pulling out a handgun she hadn't seen him hide. "The estate has backup generators. They kick in instantly. This isn't a power cut." He clicked the safety off. "Someone cut the line." He grabbed Kaylee and pulled her off the chair, shoving her into the narrow space between the bed and the wall. "Stay down," he hissed. From the hallway, there was a muffled thump, the sound of a heavy body hitting the floor. "Silas," Sandro whispered. The door handle to the bedroom slowly, agonizingly, began to turn. Kaylee pressed her hands over her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. They were in the dark, alone, and the monster was at the door. Sandro raised the gun, aiming it at the wood. His breath was steady. "Welcome to the family, Kaylee," he whispered. The door creaked open. The door to the bedroom didn't just open. It glided inward, pushed by a gloved hand. The hallway behind was pitch black, the emergency lights having failed to trigger another impossibility in a house designed to withstand a siege. Sandro didn't hesitate. He didn't ask, "Who's there?" or fire a warning shot. He squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop. The silencer on Sandro's weapon made the shots sound like polite coughs, but the impact was visceral. The silhouette in the doorway jerked violently, one shoulder spinning backward, and collapsed onto the Persian rug. "Don't move," Sandro hissed at Kaylee, pushing himself off the floor. He was white as a sheet, the exertion tearing at his abdominal stitches, but his hand was rock steady. He advanced on the fallen figure, gun trained on the head. Kaylee scrambled to her feet, grabbing a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Sandro kicked the gun away from the intruder's hand. It skittered across the floorboards. "Clear," Sandro said, his voice tight. Kaylee rushed to the door, peering into the gloom of the hallway. "Silas," she whispered. A low groan answered her. The giant bodyguard was slumped against the opposite wall, a small, feathered dart protruding from his neck. He wasn't dead, but he was paralyzed, his eyes rolling back in his head. "Tranquilizer," Kaylee assessed quickly, checking his pulse. "He's bradycardic, slow heart rate. He needs atropine or he might stop breathing." "Leave him," Sandro ordered, grabbing her arm. "There will be more. We have to move. We can't just leave him to die," Kaylee protested, pulling against his grip. "If we stay, we all die." Silas knew the job. Sandro's face was grim, a mask of pain and resolve. "The panic room. It's behind the library fireplace. We have to get downstairs." "You can barely walk," Kaylee countered. She grabbed his arm, slinging it over her shoulder. "Lean on me, and don't you dare pass out." They moved into the hallway. The house was a tomb. The silence was heavier than the darkness. Every shadow looked like a gunman. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. They reached the grand staircase. Below, flashlights' beams were cutting through the dark in the foyer. "Damn," Sandro whispered, pulling her back into the shadows of the landing. "They're sweeping the ground floor. We can't get to the library." "Who are they?" Kaylee breathed, terrifyingly close to his ear. "Mercenaries," Sandro said. "Luca wouldn't use family soldiers for this. He'd hire outsiders, cleaners." "Cleaning us," Kaylee realized. Sandro looked around, his eyes landing on a narrow servant's door near the linen closet. "The laundry chute," he said. "You're kidding," Kaylee said, eyeing the small door. "It drops into the basement laundry room. From there, we can access the boiler tunnels. It leads to the garage." "You have abdominal surgery wounds," Kaylee hissed. "A 2-story drop will rupture your sutures. Better ruptured sutures than a bullet in the brain. Kaylee, go!" He shoved her toward the chute. Kaylee opened it. It smelled of bleach and darkness. She didn't think. She jumped. The slide was terrifyingly fast. She tumbled down the smooth metal tunnel, landing hard in a pile of dirty linens in the basement. A second later, Sandro landed beside her with a wet thud and a sharp cry of pain. Kaylee scrambled to him. Even in the dim light of the basement's emergency exit sign, she could see the dark stain spreading across his midsection. "You're bleeding again," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm fine," Sandro gritted out, clutching his side. "Help me up." Suddenly, the heavy steel door to the laundry room burst open. A man in tactical gear stood there, a flashlight mounted on his rifle blinding them. "Found them," the man said into a radio. "Basement level. Laundry." Sandro raised his gun, but he was too slow. The man had the drop on them. "Drop it, Romano," the mercenary sneered. "Or the girl gets it first." Sandro froze. He looked at Kaylee. The gun wavered in his hand. "Do it," the man shouted. "Drop it." Kaylee saw Sandro's eyes flicker. He was going to surrender. He was going to give up to save her. But Kaylee Jonasson was done being a victim. She was kneeling in a pile of laundry. Her hand brushed against something hard and plastic, a bottle of industrial bleach, in one fluid motion. While the mercenary was focused on Sandro's gun, Kaylee grabbed the gallon jug, unscrewed the cap, and hurled the liquid contents into the blinding light. "My eyes!" the mercenary screamed, firing blindly into the ceiling as the caustic liquid splashed his face. Pop! Sandro fired once. The mercenary dropped. "Nice aim," Sandro wheezed, looking at Kaylee with a mixture of shock and admiration. "I aim for the eyes," Kaylee said, shaking. "Nurses know where the weak points are." "Remind me never to piss you off," Sandro muttered. He holstered his gun and grabbed her hand. "Come on, the garage." They stumbled through the boiler tunnels, steam hissing from the pipes like angry snakes. When they burst into the garage, the scene was chaotic. The backup generators finally kicked in, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent light. Stefano Romano was standing by the limousines, surrounded by a dozen loyal guards. He was screaming orders into a phone. When he saw Sandro and Kaylee emerge from the service tunnel, covered in blood and bleach, he dropped the phone. "Alessandro!" Stefano roared, actually running toward his son. Sandro took 2 steps toward his father and collapsed. Kaylee caught him, sliding down to the concrete floor with his weight. "Medic!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Get me a trauma kit." Now, Stefano fell to his knees beside them. For the first time, The Don looked terrified. "Who did this?" Stefano demanded, his hands hovering over his son's bleeding body. Sandro looked up, his eyes finding Kaylee's. He grabbed her scrub top, pulling her down. "Don't," he whispered weakly. "Don't tell him about Luca. Not yet." "Why?" Kaylee cried. "He almost killed us." "Because—" Sandro gasped, his eyes rolling back. "We need the trap." And then the Prince of Chicago went limp in her arms. The medical bay in the Romano estate was better equipped than most rural hospitals. Kaylee had been working on Sandro for 2 hours. He was stable, stitched back up, and pumped full of antibiotics and blood replacements. He was unconscious, but the rhythm on the monitor was steady. Kaylee stripped off her bloody gloves and washed her hands in the sink. The water ran pink. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her hair was a rat's nest, her face smeared with soot and blood that wasn't hers. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. The old Kaylee worried about student loans and shift schedules. This Kaylee had blinded a mercenary with bleach. The door opened. Stefano walked in. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "He will live?" Stefano asked. His voice gravel. "He's strong," Kaylee said, drying her hands. "But he needs rest. Real rest. Not whatever this was." Stefano nodded. He walked to the bedside and touched his son's forehead. It was a tender gesture that looked wrong on such a violent man. "We found 3 bodies," Stefano said. "Mercenaries. No ID. No fingerprints. Burner phones that were wiped clean." "And Silas?" Kaylee asked, recovering. The dart was ketamine. Heavy dose. Stefano turned to Kaylee, his eyes narrowing. "You saved him. Again." "I did my job," Kaylee said. "You did more than your job. You fought." Stefano reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "Name the number, Miss Johnson. You have earned your freedom." Kaylee looked at the checkbook. She thought about her debt, her apartment, her cat. She could leave, right now. She could take $1 million and disappear to an island where the name Romano was just a type of cheese. But then she looked at Sandro. She remembered his hand gripping hers in the dark. "We need the trap." "I can't leave," Carly said. Stefano paused. "Excuse me." "I can't leave because your son is still in danger," Kaylee said, her voice gaining strength. "And because I know something about the attacker in the bedroom that your men missed." Stefano's demeanor changed instantly. He wasn't a father anymore. He was the Don. "What did you see?" "The man in the bedroom," Kaylee said. "Before the lights came on. I smelled him. Smelled him. He smelled of antiseptic, iodine, and latex." Kaylee walked over to the counter where the evidence bag containing the mercenary's gear had been placed. "And when I checked his body, look at his hands." She pulled up the photo on the tablet the guards had taken. "His fingernails," Kaylee pointed out, "scrubbed raw, and there was a callus on his middle finger, the kind you get from holding surgical instruments." Stefano stared at the photo. "A doctor, or a former one," Kaylee said. "Someone who knows anatomy. Someone who could place needles in a pillow so they hit a specific nerve cluster. Someone who could dose a guard with the exact amount of ketamine to drop him but not kill him." Stefano's face went cold. "We have a doctor on payroll. Dr. Aris. He handles sensitive matters." "Where is Dr. Aris right now?" Kaylee asked. "He is supposed to be in the West Wing," Stefano said, "attending to my brother." The pieces clicked. "Luca," Kaylee whispered. "Luca has been sick with a migraine all evening, hasn't he?" Stefano didn't answer. He turned and marched out of the room. Kaylee followed him. They found Luca in the main drawing room, sipping brandy by the fire. He looked pristine, relaxed. Doctor. Aris was nowhere to be seen. Stefano. Luca stood up, feigning relief. "I heard the shooting stopped. Is Alessandro?" "He is alive," Stefano said, watching his brother's face closely. For a split second, Luca's eyes twitched. Disappointment. "Thank God," Luca said, smoothing his jacket. "I was so worried. I tried to come down, but security locked me in." "Where is Doctor Aris?" Kaylee asked, stepping out from behind Stefano. Luca looked at her with disdain. "The nurse. Still here, Doctor. Aris went to the pharmacy in town hours ago to get my migraine medication." "Really?" Kaylee asked. "Because the intruder we shot in the bedroom, he had a pacemaker scar, a very specific vertical scar." She was bluffing. She hadn't seen a scar, but she needed to shake him. Luca's glass clinked against the table as he set it down. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying," Kaylee said, stepping closer. "That doctor. Aris didn't go to the pharmacy. I think if we check the body in the morgue, we'll find he is Dr. Aris." The silence in the room was absolute. Luca looked at Stefano. "Brother, are you going to let this help accuse me?" Stefano looked at Kaylee, then at Luca. He was weighing 30 years of brotherhood against the life of his son. "Check the body," Stefano ordered his head of security. "If it is Oris, bring me his head." "Wait." A voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Sandro was standing there, leaning heavily against the doorframe, his IV stand acting as a cane. He was pale, sweating, but his eyes were burning. "Don't check the body," Sandro rasped. "Sandro, you should be in bed," Kaylee cried, rushing to him. "I said wait," Sandro commanded. He looked at his uncle. "If Oris is dead, Luca will just say the doctor went rogue. He'll say Oris was paid off by a rival family. He'll deny everything." "It's the truth," Luca shouted. "I know nothing of this." Sandro limped forward. "We don't need the body. We have the phone." He held up a shattered, bloody smartphone. It was the one from the mercenary. "Technicians cracked it," Sandro lied. He held the black screen up. One outgoing text message sent 3 minutes before the attack started. It says, "Subject is in the bedroom. Green light." Sandro turned the phone so the screen faced Luca. "And do you know who received that text?" "Uncle A." Luca's face went grey. He patted his pocket instinctively. "Don't bother," Sandro said. "We pinged it. The receiving phone is in this room." All eyes turned to Luca's coat pocket. Luca laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You think a text message proves anything? I could have lost my phone. Someone could have cloned it." "Maybe," Sandro said. "But there's one thing you forgot. Uncle." "And what is that?" "The needles," Sandro said softly. Kaylee found 17 needles, but the pack holds 18. Sandro reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, plastic evidence bag. Inside was a single, long darning needle. "We found this one," Sandro said, his voice deadly quiet. "In the trunk of your car, with your fingerprints on it." It was another lie, a magnificent, dangerous lie. But Sandro sold it with the conviction of a man who had already died once that night. Luca broke. He didn't confess. He didn't cry. He moved, with the speed of a desperate animal. Luca drew a small pistol from his ankle holster and grabbed Kaylee, hauling her in front of him as a shield. "Back off!" Luca screamed, pressing the gun to Kayleigh's temple. "Back off, or she dies." Stefano raised his cane, his face a mask of pure betrayal. "Luca, put it down. You were supposed to die," Luca yelled at his brother. "You and your cancer. You were supposed to rot, and I was supposed to take the chair, but you lingered. And this boy, this arrogant boy, he is not ready." "Let her go," Sandro said. He dropped his gun. He held his hands out. "This is between us, uncle, family. Let the girl go." "No," Luca sneered, tightening his grip on Kayleigh's throat. "She's my ticket out of here. I want a car. I want the jet prepped, or the nurse gets a needle in the brain." Kayleigh felt the cold steel of the gun barrel. She smelled Luca's expensive cologne, mixed with the sour sweat of fear. She saw Sandro standing there, wounded, bleeding, helpless. She remembered the anatomy chart in nursing school, the brachial plexus, the nerve cluster in the armpit that controls the hand. Luca's arm was wrapped around her chest. His armpit was exposed. Kayleigh didn't scream. She didn't struggle. She made a fist, protruding the knuckle of her middle finger, and drove it hard and fast into Luca's axillary nerve. Luca's arm went into a spasm. His hand flew open involuntarily. The gun dropped before it hit the floor. Kayleigh stomped on Luca's instep and threw her head back, smashing into his nose. Luca stumbled back, blinded by pain. Bang! Stefano didn't hesitate this time. He fired a single shot from the revolver he kept in his waistband. Luca fell. It was over. Kayleigh stood there, panting, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She looked at Sandro. He was smiling. "I told you," Sandro whispered, before sliding down the doorframe. "She's a keeper." The gunshot that ended Luca Romano's life didn't echo like in the movies. It was a flat, ugly crack that seemed to suck the air out of the drawing room. Luca crumpled onto the Persian rug, his ambition bleeding out into the intricate silk patterns. Stefano stood over his brother, the smoking revolver loose in his grip. He didn't look like a victor. He looked like a man who had just amputated his own arm to save the body. "Get the cleaners," Stefano whispered to his head of security, his voice brittle. "And get my son a chair." Kayleigh didn't wait for a chair. She guided Sandro to the nearest velvet sofa, easing him down as his legs finally gave out. The adrenaline that had fueled his desperate bluff was gone, leaving him grey and trembling. "You're an idiot," Kayleigh hissed, checking his pulse. It was thready. "A brilliant, suicidal idiot." Sandro looked up at her, a lopsided grin forming on his pale face. "It worked, didn't it?" "You gambled with my life," she said, her hands shaking as she checked his pupils. "No," Sandro murmured, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "I gambled on you. I knew you wouldn't freeze. Most people freeze. Kayleigh, you fight." Later that night, after the police had come and gone, paid off and steered away with a story about a break-in gone wrong, Kayleigh sat with Sandro in the conservatory. The rain was hammering against the glass roof, washing away the sins of the estate. "Did you really find a needle in his trunk?" Kayleigh asked quietly. Sandro swirled the brandy in his glass. "No." And the text message, the phone was locked. Sandro admitted, looking at the dark liquid. "We couldn't crack it in time. The screen I showed him was just a black background image. I had nothing." Kayleigh stared at him. "You terrified him into a confession with a blank screen. I had psychology," Sandro said, his eyes meeting hers. "Luca was a perfectionist. Perfectionists are terrified of small mistakes. When I mentioned the missing 18th needle, His brain filled in the gap. He panicked, and panic is the only truth in this world. Kaylee realized then that the man sitting before her wasn't just a victim. He was a king in waiting, and he was dangerous. "My father is dying." "Kaylee," Sandro said suddenly. "The cancer. He has days, maybe a week, when he goes. The truce ends. The sharks will circle." "I know," she said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond ring, but a silver lapel pin shaped like a lion, the crest of the Romano family. "I can pay you the $1 million my father promised," Sandro said. "You can go to Florida, buy a house, forget this nightmare." He pushed the box across the table. "Or you can stay, not as a nurse, but as a partner. I need someone who sees the needles before they prick me, someone who aims for the eyes." Kaylee looked at the pin. It represented violence, fear, and a life looking over her shoulder. But looking at Sandro, she felt a rush she had never felt in the sterile halls of the hospital. She felt alive. "Does the cat come too?" she asked. Sandro smiled, and it reached his eyes. "I already sent a car for Barnaby." 6 months later, the funeral of Stefano Romano was the largest Chicago had seen in 50 years. The procession of black limousines stretched for 3 miles, a river of steel and sorrow winding through the city. At the graveside, the rain fell in a soft, steady drizzle. Alessandro Romano stood at the head of the grave. He wore a black suit that cost more than most people earned in a decade, his face impassive behind dark glasses. He was the Don now. The weight of the empire sat on his shoulders, heavy and absolute. But he didn't stand alone. Beside him, holding a black umbrella that shielded them both, was Kaylee. She wore a tailored trench coat, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. On her lapel, the silver lion pin glinted in the grey light. When the service ended, the captains of the families approached to pay their respects. They kissed Sandro's ring. They murmured their fealty. And then they turned to the woman. "Don Alessandro," one of the capos said, bowing his head. "And Donna Kaylee." Kaylee nodded a sharp, imperious acknowledgement. She didn't look down. She scanned the perimeter, her eyes moving over the tree line, the crowd, the drivers. She was looking for feathers. She was looking for glints of steel. Sandro took her arm as they turned to leave. "Anything," he murmured, leaning close. "Clear," Kaylee replied, her voice steady. "But the driver in the 3rd car is new. His hands are shaking. I'll have Silas switch him out," Sandro said. They walked toward the lead car, their steps perfectly in sync. As Silas opened the door, Sandro paused. He looked back at the grave, then at Kaylee. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was a rare moment of vulnerability. Kaylee looked at the empire that surrounded them, the danger, the power, the man who loved her with a ferocity that burned. "I'm awake," she said, "for the first time in my life. I'm finally awake." The heavy door slammed shut, sealing them in the quiet, bulletproof warmth of their shared kingdom. The engine purred, and the convoy moved out. There would be other needles. There would be other wars. But as Kaylee rested her head on Sandro's shoulder, she knew one thing for certain. They would never catch them sleeping again. And that is the story of how a simple pillow almost brought down an empire, and how a nurse found love in the barrel of a gun. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room isn't the man with the weapon, it's the person who knows where the nerves are. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, medical mysteries, and mafia romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. What would you have done if you found needles in your patient's pillow? Would you have run? Or would you have stayed like Kaylee? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay sharp and check your pillows.